So welcome to our jurisprudence class, and tonight we would like to discuss Marxist jurisprudence, or the theory of law as reflected in the thinking of Karl Marx. Yeah, so that is what we want to look at tonight, and we'll be linking it to our own historical experience as Ghanaians, how our legal system has actually evolved since the colonial times up to date, to help us to understand whether what Karl Marx is saying is actually something sustainable or not sustainable, as it were. Yeah, so the person behind the theory, Marxist jurisprudence, or Marxism, or what we call the Marxist theory of law, is the man Karl Marx. And the man Karl Marx is well known in the sense that those who have learned economics, who have learned sociology, who have learned history, and also political science or government before, you will certainly have come across the man Karl Marx. So the man Karl Marx was born on 5th May 1818. Those of you remember your law of contracts, the well-known case of what do you call the Adams and Lindsay was also decided in 1818 by just coincidence. And Marx is from Prussia, that is Germany. He studied in the famous University of Bonn and also in Germany. He did a very important work, and the important works include the Communist Manifesto. The Communist Manifesto is not a lengthy work, but it's a very interesting work. And if you get a copy, just read it. And you can just also download it online. There are a lot of PDF versions available. And another work we call Das Kapital. Das Kapital. Yes, so now we need to contextualize Karl Marx before we look at his exposition in relation to law. He was influenced by the classical political economy as reflected in the ideas of Adam Smith. You all know Adam Smith. We are told that he's father of father of economics, Adam Smith, and his famous theory on division of labor, if you remember. And then he emphasized that where you have division of labor and people specialize on things that they are better suited for, you will have efficiency and there will be increase in output or productivity. So that's a division of labor. And of course, David Ricardo, you also remember his own labor theory of value. And later on, if you look at even international trade, you notice that Ricardo's idea, especially with respect to comparative theory, and also as opposed to absolute cost advantage, were important ideas which these economists propounded. And all these ideas will serve as part of the network of influences which exercise the mind or the thinking of Karl Marx. So that is the reason for trying to explore the broad brush approach, some of these scholars, so that we are able to understand what was actually working in the mind of Karl Marx when he propounded the ideas that he did, which we are going to be surveying pretty soon. So Karl Marx integrated and also critique the ideas of these influencers, that is Adam Smith and then Ricardo, and he critiqued these ideas within his own economic theories and focused on the dynamics of capitalism and the labor process. So he was interested in the interaction between capitalism and also labor process. And as you can see, is a very good upshot from Adam Smith and Ricardo, in the sense that talking about division of labor, you're also talking about factors of what of production and so on and so forth. So the fact that some people will own certain factors of production and they may need to do some kind of like a trade-off. But you notice that factors of production are not essentially the same. Some may be more dominant in terms of having a stronger bargaining capacity, and for that matter, will be able to have its way over and above other factors, as it were. So let's keep this at the back of our mind. So all these things will serve as part of the backdrop or the background for Marxist ideas, as it were. And of course, as we have noted in this particular course already, last semester, as part of the introduction to jurisprudence, I did remind you, or I did point out to you that when it comes to theories, when it comes to concepts, every theorist, that is, everyone who propounds a theory, okay, every propounder of a theory or a doctrine is a reflection of his own lived experience. So the society in which he lives in. So you live in Ghana, you are used to Ghana legal system. You are used to the economic realities of Ghana. You are used to the social realities of Ghana, cultural realities of Ghana. And for that matter, if you are to come out with an idea to provide an explanation for something, and that is what a theory is. So theory is trying to come up with a grand idea to provide explanation for a phenomenon, for a subject. So that is what a theory is. So if you wanted to do that, certainly you will be influenced by your own lived biases. You'll be influenced by what you have actually lived in. So that is how it is. And it was not different for Karl Marx. So he too, being a German, was also influenced by German philosophy. And in this particular case, he was deeply influenced by George Friedrich Hegel. Excuse me, I'm teaching online. Thank you. He was influenced by Hegel's dialectical method. You know, Hegel is a very respected scholar, and he introduced the idea of dialectics. Dialectics, and you eventually make the point that where you have interaction between ideas, like, if you like, the positive and its opponent, negative, thesis and antithesis, eventually it will give rise to another thing. And you have that kind of like a cycle going on. So that is the Hegelian dialectics, as it were. But Marx would adapt or refine Hegel's dialectical method into what he would call the dialectical materialism. So he would look at the dialectics from material perspective. And that is what later on will give rise to this idea of class-based superstructure and all that, which we'll be looking at pretty soon. So we'll notice that Marx, his important contribution was that he developed a theory of history and society based on the dynamics of class struggle and economic forces. So when we say class struggle, he sees society as made up of classes. That is, we have stratification, we have categories. Yeah, someone hands it up. Let's hear him before we move on. Gordon Anim. Oh, sorry. No. Gordon. No, I think his mic is off. You can use the chat, okay? Yeah, so Marx will also reflect on the capitalist society that he was born into or he came to meet. And he will stress the fact that within the capitalist society is configured, or the society is organized in such a way that there is exploitation and alienation. So it's like some people are exploited and pushed to the margins or to the periphery of society, as it were. So this is the kind of, dissatisfactory observation, if you like, which he had made about the society that he had come to meet. Yeah, so, okay, I think let's see, there's something in the chat. Sir, please, I am receiving any information. What does that mean? Oh, you are not receiving any information. Do you mean you don't hear us or you don't see the screen? Like you don't hear the sound or you don't see the screen. What does that mean? Can you let us know so that we can help you? Okay, Gordon. Any answer? Is it the case the sound does not? Okay, I think it's gone. Okay, whatever. Yeah, okay. So the Marxist jurisprudence or Marxist theory of law has its own philosophical foundation or underpinning, as we have been talking about. And that is essentially Hegelian dialectics and materialism. What do you mean by Hegelian dialectics? Hegelian, just from a theory by a scholar called Hegel. He was also a German, right? Hegel. And Hegel's dialectics involve the process of thesis. So thesis simply means that you make like a positive assertion, a positive statement or proposition. So that is thesis. And then antithesis, you make a counter proposition, a proposition against that which existed or which had been made earlier. So that is like a negative version. And then synthesis. So synthesis, you try to bring the opposite and the negative together, the thesis and the antithesis. So that is a synthesis. And when they come together, the thesis and antithesis are certainly conflicting. Conflicting in the sense that they are divergent, they are pointing in different directions. Thesis is positive, antithesis is negative. Now you put them together, that is synthesis. And where you have conflicting ideas, they lead to the formation of a new or a more developed idea or state. So that is the point about the Hegelian dialectics. The fact that combining conflicting ideas will result in the formation of, if you like, a new idea or a new state or new situation, as it were. Now, this Hegelian dialectics, which was a dominant philosophy in Germany at the time, and when Karl Marx also studied at the University of Bonn and all that, had an impact on Karl Marx. So Karl Marx adopted the dialectical method, but did not just take it as it is. He took what he found attractive and he refined or modified or adapted aspects of Hegelian dialectics, which he didn't agree with. So he transformed Hegelian dialectics into materialistic dialectic and argued that material conditions rather than ideas drove historical development. So Hegel is talking about ideas, that if you like the positive and negative ideas coming together, then you are going to get like a new development and all that, fine. But Karl Marx disagreed, and he said that it's not necessarily the coming together of conflicting ideas which actually give rise to a new situation. It is rather the underlying material conditions which drive historical development, which dictates the next direction of history, the next direction of society. So that is what he meant. So let's say a few more words about the Marxist materialism. Now, this is also known as the materialist conception of history. They are the same thing, or historical materialism is the same thing. So Karl Marx put forward the idea that material economic base of society conditions or influences the political and ideological structure. In other words, according to Karl Marx, the political system you have, right? Political system you have, or the political ideology that you have, is a reflection of the economic realities of that society, the economic basis of that society. So therefore, if the economy, if factors of production and so on are controlled by a few elites, then the political system is going to be organized in such a way that it will reflect or advance the interests of that elite, as it were. So how does that affect thinking about law? So from Marx's perspective, law is seen as a reflection of societal relations of production, serving to reinforce the interest and power of the ruling class. So as I said, how when it comes to factors of production, how things are, the kind of relationship built around how production is organized is that which will determine how society is also organized. So therefore, if we are talking about, let's say, factors of production like land, if land, capital, are all controlled by certain people, then those who do not have all those things, and all that they have is their labor, their brute force, as it were, would have to actually provide their services according to the terms and conditions dictated by those who control the other powerful or dominant factors of production. So maybe let's look at the key or core concepts of Marxist theory. So Marxist will make the point that history should be seen from a materialist point of view. And by that, he says that some of his famous statements, and I quote, that history is the history of class struggle. So for him, when we talk about history, history is nothing other than a history of class struggle. In other words, an account of how the various classes in society have actually been at each other's neck, have confronted each other in various historical epochs, or that is the essence of history. So that is why we say that he has a materialist conception of history. And Marxist posits that the economic conditions or the modes of production form the base upon which societal institutions, including states and law, are built. So how society is organized, political system, governance structure, law, and institutions of law, according to Karl Marx, are all organized or structured to reflect the modes of production in society. And for that matter, when it comes to law, law is not just a collection of rules, but a reflection of societal power dynamics and economic structures. So this is the typical Marxist thinking, that law is not just a collection of rules, but a reflection of societal power dynamics and economic structures. What does it mean by class struggle? Karl Marx identified history as primarily the outcome of class struggle, as we have noted. And this involves conflicts between the dominant class, which later on you call like the bourgeoisie, right? The dominant class, also known as the bourgeoisie, which controls production, and the subordinate class, known as the proletariat or the masses, who are the labor providers. So this is like, if you like, the typical classes. So society is stratified. Society is put into two categories or layers. We have the bourgeoisie, that is the dominant class, those who control capital, including land. And then we have the masses or proletariat, those who do not have anything apart from their labor. Now, in relation to law, Marx will observe that the class struggle is often encoded in laws which appear neutral but serve to perpetuate class disparities. In other words, Marx was suspicious about law, that if you take law, law is not neutral, nor is not innocent at all in this class struggle you are talking about. That law, on the face of it, may appear neutral, but if you subject it to closer scrutiny or analysis, you notice that it is actually crafted to serve the interests of the dominant class, the bourgeoisie, to the detriment or subjugation of the proletariat or the masses. So that is the point Marx is making. So you talk about a base and superstructure. So the base comprises the economic forces and relations of production, as we have talked about. So, and the base, which is the economic forces and relations of production, in Marx thinking, determines the superstructure. You know, like we can have the analogy, right? The analogy of like a story building. The story building, you've got like the foundation, that is the base. And then we have like the various levels. So that is the superstructure. So Marx is saying that if you use that analogy, so that in society, the foundation is the economic relations, the mode of production. So that is the base. And then the other aspects of society, what you call like the superstructure, the other institution. So such as culture, religion, legal system, political institutions, all these are configured or organized or arranged according to the underlying economic relation. I'll give you a typical example, so that maybe you take let's use culture as an example. Okay, let's use culture as an example. Maybe let's take I'm familiar with, let's use the Ashanti culture as an example, which I'm most familiar with. So you say that we, for example, when it comes to like the chieftaincy, institution and all that, that land, for example, the Alodia title, remember Ohimene J, and also the Land Act. But until maybe the modern day refinement, by and large, the Alodia title was often associated with like the stool or the skin or the family. But let's say in Ashanti, it will be most of the time like the particular stool. So they have like the Alodia title. And if we look at the society, everything is organized around the fact that there is somebody or group of people who are the ultimate wielders of power in that particular community. And everything they're organized, if you examine them carefully, are organized to serve their interests, to advance their interests, to the disadvantage of the greater majority of the masses or the ordinary folks. Then, yeah, so we look at the structure of law, including property, property rights, title, and all that. And contract law, according to this base and superstructure analogy, is shaped to protect the economic interests of the ruling class. So that is the point that will be made. If you look at like property law, for example, property is largely owned by the dominant class, the bourgeoisie. So if you have a law which is meant to determine how title to property is transferred from one person to another, how you need to give valuable consideration, how you cannot just go and settle on somebody's land unless you have been on the land for 12 years in open, unchallenged way, and then we say there's adverse possession and so on, before the original owner can be said to have had his title extinguished and all that. So Marx will say that, well, if you look at all this, in reality, they serve the interests of the dominant class. So Marx also talk about law as being an instrument or a tool of class oppression. That one class, that is a dominant class, they use law as an instrument at their disposal to subjugate the other class, that is the proletariat or the masses. So therefore, the ruling class, they use law to advance or enforce their will and use it to suppress dissent or those who do not agree with the expression of their will. Then it will reduce into law, and you have to comply with the law, otherwise you've committed illegality, and then there will be consequences. So Marx's thinking is that laws are not universally just. So in other words, justice is not necessarily inherent in every law. So laws are tools to maintain existing power structures. And what are the existing power structures? The bourgeoisie will continue to be at the top, and then the proletariat or the masses will continue to be at the bottom. Maybe let's look at a small case study. Can we say that there are certain laws in Ghana which have favored capitalist accumulation over workers' rights? So maybe let's look at the Labor Act, for example. If you look at the Labor Act, it's supposed to protect the right of workers, because the assumption is that for a long time, employers have exploited workers and all that. But if you examine the Labor Act closely, are you convinced that it actually achieves that and is not in a subtle way still trying to protect the interests of employers? Maybe a typical example, if you look at the Labor Act, where an employer, for example, an employee has decided to join a union, right, trade union or something like that, and an employer, you take maybe an action to terminate his employment or anything like that, that is unfair termination, and the worker will be entitled to reinstatement. What about when it comes to industrial action? How the law is organized? Does it serve the interests of the employer more, or does it serve the interests of the employee? So these are some of the things that we are talking about. And again, if you take, let's say, colonial laws, for example, maybe I will not go far. I will probably just cite the example of what we called Angu Enata, all right, where we are told that customary law, for example, is not actually regarded as a law unless it's just a question of fact, and it will have to prove like any question of fact, unless it has been, proven in the court over and over and again, so that it becomes so notorious that when it is asserted, the court is too familiar with it that there's no need for you to prove it again. Now, if you look at customary law in relation to the colonialists, customary law definitely will have served the interests of the colonial, the people, the indigents, their interests, as against the colonial masters. And for that reason, Anguenata was cleverly propounded to say that, yes, but of course, if you look at the rule Anguenata on the face of it, you say that nothing evil was intended because customary law was largely not documented, and most of the judges at the time were actually foreigners. And for that matter, if it's asserted, it will be difficult for them to just locate it in the books. So why not let the person who's propounding it to bring an evidence? So if you look at it from that perspective, you think that there was nothing wrong. But then if you also put on your Marxist thinking lens or perspective, then you begin to say that to an extent, we can say that the colonial legal system approach towards customary law could be seen as an attempt to use law as a tool of class operation, as it were. Yeah, so we've said a lot about the dialectical materialism. But just for emphasis. So the dialectical materialism, as we have said, is a system of thinking predicated upon materialistic conception of the universe. And when I say materialistic conception now, you know what I mean. The fact that Marx is saying that it is the economic conditions or the modes of production in society which actually determine the direction or the future of that particular society. So that is what he means by that. And the examination of the interdependence and the contradictions inherent within all phenomena. So that is a dialectical materialism. And that is what we earlier broke it down, that you have thesis and antithesis from Hegel's dialectics, something you call the dialectical. So dialectical means that to debate. And then from that, you get the word the dialectics. And the dialectics Hegel introduced was supposed to be an opposite of the metaphysical or transcendental speculation. That is where people will just propound ideas as if the ideas are taken as given. The ideas are immune from being questioned or being criticized. For example, as like having dropped from God, so to speak. Now, Hegel rejected all that, and Hegel wanted to use what we call the discourse, the dialectical approach, that when you have two opposing ideas, thesis and synthesis, as we have talked about, Then you get like the, thesis and antithesis. Then you get like the synthesis. You get like a new idea. And that is, more or less empirical, as it were. But as we've indicated, Marx took that idea further and said that it's not just the ideas, but the economic conditions, and then how people are organized according to the economic conditions. That will determine tomorrow, or how society appears to be, as it were. And certainly, if we are to relate these things back to what we learned in natural law and all that, you notice that this is a complete departure from what natural law thinking is. The natural law thinking is that there are certain higher principles of morality which can be discovered either by employment of our reason or by appealing to authority of God. And then we know those principles. The law is supposed to approximate, or is supposed to reflect those principles and all that. And as you can see, that is abstraction, or you are just exercising speculation. But dialectics is more or less practical, something that you can relate to. And it's the same thing that Marx adapted for the material dialectics. So we could say that within Marxist jurisprudence, nature is connected, an integral whole. That is to say that we don't have to look at one thing only on its terms in isolation from other phenomena. So law is not isolated phenomena. Law is connected with or depend on other phenomena. So to study law, we don't have to study law alone. We have to study law against the background of other disciplines. We need to study law also in relation to economics, in relation to sociology, in relation to history, in relation to psychology, in relation to religion. All these are important in trying to understand law, because according to Marxist thinking, there is that interrelationship, interconnections between all of them. Another point is that nature is in a state of constant change. That is one aspect of Marxist jurisprudence, that nature is never static. It's not standing still. All the time, you see changes happen in society. Society is never static, as it were. And for that matter, if we are to study law and the institution of law, we must also appreciate this dynamic aspect of nature, dynamic aspect of society. And those of us in Ghana remember the famous dictum of Justice Sowa into 4 versus Attorney General, that the Constitution is not an ordinary document. A doctrinal approach towards its interpretation will not do, because the Constitution is a mirror which reflects the aspirations, which reflect the past and so on of society. And we are told that it's capable of growth because society is what? It's dynamic. Again, within Marxist thinking and appreciating the dialectical materialism, it is also important to note that development in all phenomena manifests or takes place in imperceptible quantitative changes, which translate or transform to fundamental quantitative changes. That is to say that the changes that happen in society, there are changes that you may not immediately realize it. However, over time, incrementally, they will become evident. And it's evident by the appearance, disappearance, and reappearance of old doctrines and emergence of new ones. So there are certain things which may become obsolete. They give way, and then they come back, and so on. I'll give you an example. When it comes to distribution of spousal property, okay? If we look at the Constitution stated that, I don't have my Constitution with me, but I think it's Article 22, if I'm not mistaken, that Parliament was supposed to make a law which will govern distribution of property among spouses in the event of dissolution and all that. Now, that law, since the Constitution came into effect 7 January 1983, has not been made. And there have been a number of litigation. So the courts have had to grapple with how to adjust property rights of spouses. And you remember like the famous Mensa and Mensa line of jurisprudence, where the Supreme Court will say that, well, where property is made after the parties got married, then in absence of any statutory prescription, equality is equity. So it's presumed that the spouses are entitled to equal share, or as it were. And that used to be the approach for almost like a decade. But after some time, concerns were raised, and now we have jurisprudence or case law, which seems to water down that which was achieved in Mensa and Mensa line of cases, to the effect that, well, the fact that property acquired after entering into the marriage is treated as a spousal property does not mean that the parties are entitled to 50-50 share. It will depend upon the evidence, so that in some cases, it's possible not to share them equally. So I've just mentioned this for you to appreciate the point being made that the changes, which we say are imperceptible, but then it's evidenced by appearance, disappearance, and reappearance of old doctrines. So now, where we are used to be the old position before Mensa and Mensa. Again, within Marxist dialectical materialism too, we note that internal contradictions are inherent in all phenomena, and struggles between opposites, the old and the new, are inevitable. In other words, Marx makes the point that whether you like it or not, in every phenomena, in every situation, we have two opposing forces. We have internal contradictions. And the opposing forces or the internal contradictions means that a certain struggle is going on. A certain struggle is going on, and this struggle will eventually result in a new phenomena emerging. So therefore, will tell us that to every positive is a negative, and to every thesis is antithesis. And the effect of all this is that, as we always have alternative, opposing views, even within the same family of a particular theory. So to Karl Marx, the world is matter or material, and matter is primary, mind is secondary. And this is how he modified Hegel's dialectics. So Marx did not just stop at dialectics. He opted for material dialecticism, because ideas, when we say ideas, idea has to do with the mind. And that is why he's saying that that one is secondary. Matter is primary, meaning that matter or material is first. And then the idea from the material is second. So that's the point he's trying to say. So the mind is a reflection of matter. So the mind derives from matter, not the other way around. It's not the mind which gives rise to matter. The two in Marxist thinking are inseparable. So the world and its phenomena are entirely knowable through experiments, observation, and all that, as the scientific method will tell us. Knowledge obtained can lead us to the objective truth. And this is in contrast to natural law, which emphasizes metaphysics and primacy of spirit and so on. To Marx, there are no eternal principles, and humanity's concept changes from age to age, from time to time. And you notice, before we even look at the Marxist jurisprudence in comparative examples, you notice that even the very good examples of attempt to implement a Marxist idea, the Soviet Union and China, you notice that they have even moved on and have started making changes to how they were proceeding on the orthodox path of socialism, which is an aspect of Karl Marx's ideology. And we've also made the point that an essential component of a Marxist thinking is economics. And according to him, the laws of economic development examines the fundamental conflict between those who own instruments of production in a given society, and we said they are called the bourgeoisie, and those who have only their labor to sell in society, that's the proletariat or the masses. So the bourgeoisie are those who own the instruments of production, and they exploit the proletariat. And according to Marx, it is this mode of exploitation that characterizes the law of economic development, as it were. So Marx argued that inexorable economic laws determine and regulate production of goods and services. So those who own the instruments of production, the capitalist class, the bourgeoisie, derive surplus value from the labor of those who have nothing but only their labor power to sell, the proletariat. So the proletariats have cheap labor, which they offer. And the capitalist class amass excess products and profits. So let's look at it. You go to typical, companies. Let's say the worker even most of the workers are earning not more than 3,000 Ghana cedis, or let's say, yeah, not more than 3,000 Ghana cedis a month. But the company is making, let's say, millions of profit or hundreds of thousands of profit a day. But you have a number of workers, 10 years, if you put their earnings together, is a person's earning may not even be up to 100,000 Ghana cedis. And yet, they will exert themselves all their lives. So the greed or hunger or thirst for profits and more profits by the capitalists, the bourgeoisie, propels the capitalists to exploit the proletariat. So the bourgeoisie or the capitalists, they are greedy. They want to have more and more. They want to make more profit, more gain. And because of that, it will push them to continue and make more. But it will reach a crescendo where there will be implosion. So by historical materialism, then, Marx meant that the history of man's development is a bleak record, that is a very negative or dark record of class conflict, in which law and jurisprudence having been neutral. As we've indicated, law is accused as one of the superstructure, one of the things which is built in order to sustain or to perpetuate the mode of production in which the bourgeoisie and the dominant class and the proletariat are in the subservient or disadvantaged position. So society began with conditions in which a legal system was unnecessary because there was common ownership of property. So if you're trying to say that, yes, before we came to have individual property, law was not necessary because we had a common ownership. Everything we have belonged to everyone. So there was no need to set boundaries. Now that gave way to slave-owning society, in which some people will begin to own slaves, will fight and get control of others, will buy others. And that brought in its wake laws which recognize and protect ownership of slaves. Society moved on. Feudalism in the medieval period also emerged. Remember feudalism, a system in which we have like the landlords, the feudal lords, they own a whole stretch of land and people are living on it. You live on it on condition that when there is war, you are going to provide military service and all that. So that is like the feudalism. And that eventually got refined into what we call capitalism. And capitalism will bring in its tray a well-developed legal system. There may be some truth in this, especially if you look at the common law, right? If you look at the English law, especially how a lot of things developed around the Industrial Revolution. And around the Industrial Revolution was also, if you like, a very good time in which capitalism also flourished. So there may be some truth, if not absolute truth, in some of these claims. Now, that, since society is in a state of flux, a lot of changes are going on, it will not stop at just capitalism. According to Marx, there will be a revolution. There will be an upheaval in which the capitalist society or capitalism will be revolted against, and that will give rise to socialist society. And in socialist society, eventually, there will be no class. So to be classless, we no longer have bourgeoisies and proletariat. And because it will be classless society, law, and for that matter, legal system, will no longer be needed, because the economic contradictions, that is, those who have and those who do not have, the bourgeoisie and proletariat, has faded away. When it has faded away, there will be nothing like crime, like stealing. Who is going to steal what? Everything belongs to everyone. We only talk about stealing if you look at the definition of the offense of stealing. The standard is what? Appropriation. Well, you take the thing or you use it with the intention to deprive the owner of that particular thing for good. But where everything belongs to everyone, then we cannot talk of what? We cannot talk of stealing. We don't talk of stealing where we have a dichotomy of ownership. Yeah, so we've talked about like the base and then the superstructure. We've explained it over and over again. But one point which we wish to emphasize is that Marx made the point that as part of the revolution in which there will be a revolt against the capitalist society, there will be a revolt of the proletariat against the bourgeoisie. The state, as an institution, will also wither away, will gradually disappear. That's what it meant. So we use the withering away of the state, because according to him, based upon the idea of historical materialism, that law, class, and state, just like all other phenomena, are also subject to change or eventual decay. So, following the inevitable defeat of those who own instruments of production, the bourgeoisies, will be a radical transformation of the rule of law and state, and ultimately society. So we eventually get a classless society, and once you have a classless society, there'll be no need for state apparatus and law as such. There'll be no need for the legal, most of the legal institutions, the police, the courts, the prisons, they will not be necessary. Why? Because we have a classless society. We don't have law being used as an instrument or as a tool for class oppression. So exploitation and poverty, which were the root causes of crime and had been justified by pre-existing jurisprudence, will vanish when the revolution has actually taken place. And for that matter, Marx makes the point that the state and law will wither away, will disappear, will decay after the transitional period from capitalism to socialism. Now, if you have read the book of the Animal Farm, if you read the book by George Orwell, right? George Orwell, The Animal Farm. The Animal Farm is a political satire, as it were, despite the fact that it's also a fable because they use like a lot of animal characters. But if you decode or you interpret the Animal Farm, you will notice that it is a subtle ridicule of Marxism or Karl Marx thinking. Because those who haven't read Animal Farm, you will notice that Mr. Jones was there in the Animal Farm and all that. Now, it got to a point in time, the animals, some of their seniors, the most senior man or animal was what do you call old Major, a very senior pig. So one night when their human boss, Mr. Jones, was out, they held a meeting, and old Major made an effort to help the animals to become aware of their deprived condition, how they are actually exploited by their human leaders. They are used to do a lot of work, and very little is even given to them to enjoy and all that. And he told them that he had a dream in which there was going to be a glorious animal farm, or like a kingdom or state in which they will no longer be under the control of their human leaders who exploit them. So he had hinted of a revolution. So these animals actually masterminded, they planned or designed how they were going to execute this revolution. And at the right time, they actually implemented it, and they succeeded in chasing their animal leaders, their human leaders out of the farm. So if you are drawing analogy, their human leaders were more or less like the bourgeoisie and all that, okay? And they have disappeared now, they've left. Now, a lot of things were changed, but interestingly, it did not take long for another batch of bourgeoisie to merge among the animals themselves. Their leaders, well, old Major died not too long ago, and some other senior pigs who had taken over leadership role in no time also became power drunk and developed themselves into the equivalent of the human bosses of the animal. And the very things that they had actually complained of against their human bosses. Now, this new leadership was also doing the same thing. So that is why I said that the Animal Farm is like a political satire in which, in a very subtle way, the author sought to mock or create or ridicule a particular political system which is being practiced. Yeah, so how does Marx interpret law in the capitalist society? As we have been saying in different ways, that in the capitalist societies, law functions as a set of binding rules that protect private property and accumulation of capital. So largely, law, as we've been talking about, is there to serve the interests of the capital owning class. And that is why Marx said that if you look at law in the capitalist societies, they are framed as neutral and just. However, within them, if you examine them closely, they serve the interests of the bourgeoisie, the capitalist class. And what this implies is that such laws not only legalize ownership and accumulation of capital, but they also regulate the labor market to ensure a stable and controllable workforce. So, for example, if you are a worker, there used to be, those of you who've done labor law, at common law, for example, you could just be summarily dismissed for gross insubordination, unreasonable behavior, and so on. And your employer did not owe you any explanation, as it were. Again, if we look at the property law too, as I said, are designed to enforce private property rights. And if you are talking about enforcing private property rights, you are still serving the interests of the bourgeoisie because they have assets. They have various investments, isn't it? So if you have a law which says that you cannot go to another person's property without permission, otherwise you committed trespass. So you are safeguarding the interests of the property owning guy, and now he can be rest assured that it's only people that he has submitted to come onto his property that can come. Otherwise, if anybody comes, the person has committed what? Trespass, as it were. So let's examine some historical and contemporary property laws which enabled land and resources monopolies to marginalize small property owners and then landless workers, as it were. Yeah, we'll talk later. I'm teaching. Thank you. I'm teaching. So let's. I want to get practical examples from anybody. I've given you some hint already, but I want like other examples. You can draw inspiration from what I illustrated earlier on. So let's take land, for example. Let's take land. Can we say that if we look at the property law with relation to, like land law, has it served to marginalize small property owners? Let's take, if you remember your land law, especially a customary land law, let's look at the Ebunu and Ebusa. Ebunu and Ebusa, for example, do you see it as being very fair to like the the non property owning party? You know how Ebunu and Ebusa works? Can anybody tell us the land law? Yes, can anybody explain that? The Ebunu and Ebusa model. Yeah, whose hand is up? Okay, then let me call people. So Frances Pepra, you can mute yourself now. Frances Pepra.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir.
Yes.
So I want to make emphasis on Article 266 of the 1992 Constitution.
Okay. Explain
With regards to my emphasis will be on Article 2663.
Okay. Which is to the effect that.
So with your kind permission, I want to read
Yes.
what is enshrined in there before I make my emphasis.
Yes. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So Article 2663 states that where on the 22nd day of August 1969, any person not being a citizen of Ghana had a freehold interest in or right over any land in Ghana, that interest or right shall be deemed to be a leasehold interest for a period of 50 years at a peppercorn rent commencing from the 22nd day of August 1969, and the freehold reversionary interest, I repeat, the freehold reversionary interest in any such land shall vest in the president on behalf of and in trust for the people of Ghana. So you were making emphasis that Marxist theory talks about where it somehow supports the capitalist. And looking at the provision that I just read, it's seen that non-citizens of Ghana who acquired properties 50 years being stated in the Constitution goes back to the president, which I see somehow favors the capitalist, as you earlier stated.
Okay.
That's my contribution, sir.
So in this case, will you say that the whole of the people of Ghana represented by the president are the bourgeoisie? So
I see the president as the bourgeoisie.
All right. All right. Thanks for your contribution. Yes, any other?
You're welcome, sir.
Any other contribution? The good thing about jurisprudence is that there's nothing like a correct or wrong answer. So feel free to speak. Okay, let's Akoto. Akoto, you can unmute yourself. Oh, Akoto is not responding. Okay. Anyway, let's move on. Maybe let's look at the labor law again. That, as I indicated earlier on, if you look at labor law on the face of it, you will think that it's designed to protect workers. But if you are to do close analysis, you will appreciate that many labor laws are structured to prioritize operational needs and profit motives of businesses. So, for example, there's a talk about collective bargaining agreement, okay? Collective bargaining agreement where unionized workers, you get the certificate, you go and sit down with the employers or the employers association and so on, and you negotiate certain aspects of the employment relationship, various conditions of service, including emoluments. Now, workers will think that their interest is being served because they can go and hammer out terms which they want to govern their employment contracts, forgetting that when they go to the negotiation, there is the bargaining power is not even. You have inequality of bargaining power. Certainly, you're an employee and you don't want to lose your livelihood. So in terms of negotiation, there's a limit to what you can actually extract. So that is a part of it. Again, when it comes to minimum wage, it also serves the interests of employers more than employees, because you'll be told that minimum wage is supposed to protect the worker so that an employer cannot pay the worker less than the minimum wage. And that is the idea of the minimum wage, that if you are not paying the employee anything at all, you shouldn't pay the employee less than that. Just pay the employee just that or more than that. Now, if you just suppose the minimum wage with what you call the living wage standards, living wage expenses. So what is the minimum wage in Ghana at the moment? Anybody? What is the current minimum wage? Anybody? Okay, let me release you if you want to talk, but make sure that your mic is off if you are not talking so that you don't have a background noise. Yeah, what is the minimum wage at the moment? Minimum wage. How much?
18 figures.
18.15.
18.55. Or 15, all right.
18.15.
All right, thank you. So if you take 18.15, is it, it's supposed to be daily, isn't it? Daily. So minimum wage for the day. So meaning that
Yeah, it's daily.
good. The least paid worker should not be paid less than that 18 cedis. Now let's reflect that in actual living expenses. So let's suppose that you have a family, you have 2 children, you rent one hall and bedroom with your family. Now the 18 cedis, if you break it down, because the 18 cedis is supposed to also take care of all your rent, your utilities, and all that. I think for a worker's modest expenses for a day, it will be 50 cedis. Even that is the very modest, very conservative. But the employer is paying you just about 40% or 45% of what you actually need to live in a day. And for you, apart from this work, you're not doing anything in your life. So you're living your life working for the employer. And yet, what you're living your life for cannot even support your budget for one day, using very modest approach. So these are some of the things. So maybe I would like you to think about this for purposes of examination and all that. So how do Ghanaian property and labor laws align with or deviate from the capitalist model described by Marx? Now, just before we leave, let's look at Marxist jurisprudence in practice. How has Marxist legal theory been implemented in some societies? We'll pick one or two case studies. We look at Soviet Union. That is a former USSR. And in the Soviet Union, remember that after the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917, the Soviet legal system was reshaped based on Marxist and Lenin principles. And the focus was on abolishing the bourgeoisie state and law, which was seen as serving capitalist interests. So as until the Soviet Union collapsed, I think in 1989-90, you will notice that they were making an effort to practice a refined version of Marxism or Marxist and Lenin's ideology. So they introduced the socialist legal theory. So when we are learning law traditions, talk about the common law tradition, civil or continental law tradition, then you talk about the socialist law tradition. So the socialist law tradition is actually the law tradition which emerged from those countries which had made an attempt to implement Marxist legal theory. And the socialist legal theory emphasized collective property rights. That is to say that there was no recognition for private property rights. The state was supposed to own everything, and all of us constitute the state, so all of us own it. You don't owe anything by yourself. I don't owe anything by myself. The state owns everything. So there was centralization of state power. The centralization of state power. So everything belongs to the state. Not only the Soviet Union attempted to implement it, China also did the same thing. And if you look at the Chairman Mao's revolution of 1949, it also saw China embracing, attempting to incorporate Marxist theory in its legal system. So early legal reforms following the revolution sought to eliminate feudal practices because China too had, their own version of feudalism, which used to be the practice of land owning in, let's say, the English society and all that. And rather sought to promote socialist values. And they did this by adopting laws which related to land reforms and class rights. And this had been going on in China for a long time. So in implementing this new system, that is the Marxist theory in those countries, that involve addressing the class struggle. How do you address it? There's a need for land reforms. Land reform in the sense that you have to take land which are previously be owned by fewer people, right? You take it from them, and then you redistribute it so that peasants and those who do not have land will also get land to actually work on. And this is a good reflection of what Marxists aimed at, that is to dismantle feudal and capitalist property relations. Of course, if you come to, let's say, Zimbabwe, right? If you come to Zimbabwe, for example, the late President Mugabe, who became so popular and had a lot of quotations attributed to him, and almost every funny thing, people were just attributing it to him. Now, he also sought to implement this land reform because as part of the colonial rule, which also had aspect of apartheid, so to speak. There's a smaller percentage of the population, who were largely white, had become the owners of almost all the land in the country. And the greater majority do not have anything. So there was a need to do land redistribution. I mean, that you have to take it from those who have taken everything and redistribute it to those who did not have. Of course, another observable development in those countries where they sought to implement Marxist and Lenin's ideology was that over time, if you take maybe the China or you take the Soviet Union, they both develop highly centralized legal systems, which also had a negative dimension, which was that the centralized system often suppressed dissent and curtailed basic human rights. And you can easily see that even in China, we are witnessing it now. In USSR, which is defunct, and now we have like the Russia, but now when you have over-centralization, then you want everyone to fall in line. You don't want to have a dissent or opposition. And that can also bring about the use of state power in a way which will contradict Marx's idea of class liberation. Because the idea of class liberation is that law should not be used as an instrument of oppression. If you cannot freely speak your mind, if you cannot freely make choices and all that, then you are not liberated. But that is what over-centralized society, which emerges from implementation of Marxist ideology, would actually also bring about. So if we look at our own backyard, Ghana, in a way, we can also explore how Marxist jurisprudence has been implemented, or how relevant is the idea. And we can look at it in the context of the postcolonial legal system. And I just gave you example. I went far away in, let's say, Zimbabwe and all that. Now, if you come to Ghana, if you look at, let's say, the colonial time, let's look at the what we call the attempt. You remember the Aboriginal Rights Protection Society, when there was that land bill in which the colonial government at the time sought to vest all uncultivated or unoccupied land in the crown, which resulted in the so-called no ownerless land concept in Ghana. Now, the no ownerless concept, the idea that in Ghana, every land, every piece of land has got an owner, even if it is not cultivated. And that is what enabled the abolishing right protection society, the intelligentsia at the time, and all that, to revolt against the passage of that particular bill. Because if that bill has been passed, what it means is that a lot of vast stretches of land will have invested in the crown, that is, in the king or the queen of England at the time, in the name of those land being ownerless, as it were. But our leaders, intelligentsia at the time, rose against that. Now, can we think of some other colonial legacies or laws which were designed to exploit economic resources and control local population? Can we think of that so as to enable the colonialists remain in power? Of course, if you look at the whole of the colonial architecture, the whole of the colonial architecture, in my view, can be likened to the class oppression which Marxists had talked about, so that the colonialists will be like the bourgeoisie, and then the colonized, that is the indigenous people, will be like the proletariat, as it were. And because of the material dialectics, we talk about the fact that due to the inherent tension or contradiction between thesis and antithesis, there will be synthesis, and that will lead to an overthrow. Unsurprisingly, how the various struggles culminated in attainment of what? Independence. And of course, in our own country, when we had independence, how our first president at the time also sought to implement socialist ideology. And that explains why in Ghana, we have too many state-owned corporations. So we used to have the State Transport Corporation, Electricity Corporation of Ghana, Postal and Telecommunication Corporation, Ghana Water and Sewage Corporation, whatever corporation, so many of them, because there was over centralization. A lot of things were just vested in the state. And that is a reflection of an attempt to implement a Marxist ideology. But of course, if you look at some of the things which were done in the colonial era, especially when it comes to compulsory acquisition, right? How maybe the colonial government compulsorily took over certain land in the name of developing infrastructure or other things for our common good. And how after independence, some of these lands have actually been put to the use that they were intended. And yet the original public, the original stools and skins, which actually own them, have not have their land restored to them. So that is also the continued impact of some of these colonial frameworks, which were meant to, if you like, advance the interests of the dominant class, the small dominant class over the colonized, as it were. Okay, so maybe we can review our current economic policies, right? So land tenure, for example, you talk a lot about labor law. What about foreign investment regulation? Can we say that foreign investment, do we see Marxist ideas being reflected there? when it comes to the Ghana Investment Promotion Center Act, certain sectors of the economy have actually been declared as a no-go area. And do we see that, for example, as reflecting any of the things Marxist ideology is teaching us? Well, I would like us to focus on the National Health Insurance, right, NHIS, as well as the free SHS. In what ways can we say that National Health Insurance Scheme and also free SHS illustrate ongoing class struggles within the thinking of Karl Marx? Can anybody help us? Do we see National Health Insurance Scheme or the free SHS as reflecting any of the ideas associated with Marxist theory? Anybody? Are we together? Okay, Atabrenya. Benjamin, I say, go ahead.
Yeah, business meeting. Oh, I want that for them. What is there for?
Anyway, so no contribution. Let's move on. So maybe for your exams, you can think of how effectively does the current legal system in Ghana address the inequalities rooted in its colonial past? Or what changes will need to be made to the Ghanaian legal system to better align with Marxist ideals of class equality and justice? As you notice, what Karl Marx was trying to arrive at is to let's address the inequalities between the classes. And for that matter, there will be fairness and justice between the classes. So that is the ultimate aim. Now, within that context, can we say that certain changes can be made in Ghana so as to achieve that? Now, when it comes to the gender, for example, men and women, right? We have this offshoot of postmodernist thinking, feminism. Can we say that society has been quite patriarchal, that is male-dominated, so much so that society is organized to advance the interests of men to the disadvantage of women? And is that, if you like, a reflection of class struggle in a certain sense? And if it is so, what are the measures meant to address such inequalities? If you look at Article 17 of the Constitution, discrimination, anti-discrimination clause, and also what you call the justifiable discrimination in the context of affirmative vote action. Is that enough in addressing perceived inequalities between, if you like, the genders and so on? Okay, so before we leave Marxism, what are some of the criticism or challenges which have been leveled against this theory of law? So first, there is a overemphasis on economic factors. And in this respect, commentators or critics argue that Marxist theory reduces all social and political phenomena to economic factors. And this has the potential of oversimplifying complex interactions and ignoring cultural, ethical, and psychological dimensions. In other words, critics hold the view that it is not correct to argue that all the time and always it is economic reality, economic factors, which actually provide explanation for how law and society are organized. Other things which could be completely independent of economic factors, such as maybe our culture, our psychology, our sense of what is right and wrong, are also important. Another criticism leveled against Marxist jurisprudence has to do with the determinism. We see deterministic view in some of the interpretation of Marxism. And that suggests that all societal developments are predetermined by the underlying economic structures, which critics say negates the role of human agency. In other words, critics hold the view that there are certain things which are consciously brought about as a result of choices that human beings will make. And it's not really the case that it's just the economics, just the economic circumstances which actually determine everything. There are certain things which are not necessarily determined by the underlying economic conditions. Marxist jurisprudence has also been critiqued for its focus on law as a monolithic instrument of class oppression. And it is said that it overlooks the varied and diverse legal practices that exist within societies. In other words, if you take legal system, you take Ghana legal system, for example, our legal system is said to be pluralistic. Pluralistic in the sense that we are talking about combination of various sources of juridical or legal norms. We have our own customary law system, we have statutory law, we have the received common law and all that. And all these various components have been shaped over time by various developments. And for that matter, it is not correct to say that law is all that law does is that it is used as an instrument for class oppression. Which law are you talking about? Are you talking about statutory law, as in criminal law, or you are talking about customary law? You are talking about like the common law, and so on and so forth. I didn't. Somebody's hand was up. Is it Prepra?
Yes, sir. That was the question I was about to ask.
Okay.
What you were just explaining.
Right.
That listening to your submission, what Marx is talking about is all about suppression and dominance of a certain class.
Yeah.
And if so, does Marx mean that laws are made to suppress other class?
Right. Yes. Yeah. So that is the point that is why we are saying that he's taking a very limited view, and that is why they say that he's looking at law as monolithic, just as
Okay.
one way. But law is not just a one-way phenomenon. We have various dimensions, as I use the pluralistic nature of our legal system to illustrate. And in fact, if you talk about, let's say, the law on wills, for example, how you make wills, you make testamentary, arrangements. Ulu say that it's actually a means to oppress a particular class. The law on wills is there for everyone. Everyone, you would think that you may die one day, you make a will, how you want your affairs to be taken care of when you are not in this world. How does that become an instrument for class oppression? Or when it comes to the law governing marriage, for example, we don't have a law which says that certain people should not pay certain bride price or the dowry, isn't it? The same thing is there. So the way Marxist thinking is, it is neglecting legal pluralism and is taking a very limited or narrow view of law. So some of the critics, we have a direct statement from them. If we take Max Weber, for example, Max Weber critique Marxist economic determinism, emphasizing instead the role of ideas and culture in shaping societal structures. And then another critique called Friedrich Hayek. Hayek argued against the economic planning implied in Marxist societies, warning of its potential to lead to totalitarianism and the suppression of individual freedom. Yeah, but the criticism which have been leveled against Marxist theory, don't forget that, please put your mic off. Let me see. Don't forget that when Marxist started his theory, it did not die with him. Other people expressed interest, Lenin, Engels, and so many other scholars who will come later on. So some of those who are attracted to Marxist thinking, aware of the criticism which have been leveled against the theory, have also responded to some of this criticism. And we call those scholars the new Marxists, if you like, the new Marxists, just as we have like the neo-colonialism, if you like, the new form of colonialism. So neo-Marxists, the new Marxists, those who are following, if you like, the new version of Marxism, which is supposed to have responded to the criticism against the original version. So we have scholars like Antonio Gramsci, Eugene Habermas, who have expanded the Marxist theory to include cultural and ideological factors as part of superstructure that interact dynamically with the base. So if you look at the original Marxist thinking, cultural and ideological factors were not as prominent aspect of the superstructure that interacts with the base or the foundation. But these later disciples of Marxism have sought to refine it and say that you can look at it in that respect. So with respect to determinism, for example, later Marxists have detailed or nuanced the deterministic aspect of Marxism, emphasizing a more dialectical interaction between the base and the superstructure, where legal and political changes can also influence economic structures. So here, originally, it was just only the economic base, which was influencing all other superstructures, including political, law, and so on. But the later Marxists, the Neo-Marxists, they have made a tweaking. They've tweaked the theory, and they have accommodated the possibility of legal and political changes, also bringing about some impact on economic structures. Then they have also acknowledged legal pluralism, that yes, we have diversity of legal system, and there's a need to analyze how different forms of law coexist and interact within a capitalist society. Just like the examples that we give, like the law on wills, for example, or the law on interstate succession. In Ghana, for example, if a person died intestate, we have the same legal regime, regardless of the person's economic circumstances, whether you are rich or poor. We have the same default regime, which will govern how your estate should be distributed if you did not make your own will, as it were. So these are some of the refinements which have been provided to Marxist thinking. And if there are questions, I will take them. Otherwise, we will change over to company law.